"You kissed me while I was out?" the rancher blurted. The Apache woman smirked. "I saved you." The ranch was quiet that morning, the kind of quiet that made every sound stand out. The wind whispered through the tall grass, and the sun was just beginning to rise over the distant hills. John, the rancher, was already awake, as usual. He had been tending the land for years, and the early mornings were the only time he felt completely at peace. He liked the smell of the earth, the feel of the soil under his boots, and the steady rhythm of his work. Life on the ranch was simple, but it was hard. Every day brought new challenges, and there was no room for mistakes. That morning, John had a lot to do. A storm had passed the night before, and the fences needed fixing. The horses were restless, and some of the cattle had wandered near the edge of the property. John tied his wide-brimmed hat tightly to his head and grabbed his tools. He knew he couldn't delay. If the cattle wandered too far, it could take hours, maybe even a whole day, to bring them back. He mounted his horse, a strong brown stallion named Thunder, and started moving toward the far end of the ranch. The sun climbed higher, and the air grew warmer. Sweat ran down John's face, but he didn't mind. He was used to hard work, and he believed that the land gave back what you put into it. As he rode, he noticed a small group of cattle straying near a steep ravine. The ground there was uneven and dangerous. One wrong step, and an animal could fall and get seriously hurt. John felt a twinge of worry. He needed to act quickly. He nudged Thunder forward, guiding the cattle back toward safer ground. It seemed simple enough at first. The cattle moved slowly but steadily, following the familiar voice of the rancher. John felt a sense of satisfaction. This was the kind of work that made him feel alive. But then, something unexpected happened. One of the horses, spooked by a sudden noise, bolted toward the ravine. John tried to stop it, but Thunder stumbled on a loose rock, throwing John off balance. In a split second, he slipped and tumbled down a small slope. Pain shot through his leg, and he realized immediately that something was seriously wrong. John lay on the ground, trying to catch his breath. The sun was hot on his face, and the wind seemed to whisper warnings he couldn't quite understand. He attempted to stand, but the pain in his leg made him wince. It was clear he couldn't move far. The ravine below looked dangerous, and the thought of trying to crawl back to safety made him feel dizzy. He had no phone, no one nearby to help, and the nearest town was hours away. Panic began to creep in. He had faced many challenges in his life, but being alone and hurt in the middle of the ranch felt different. It was frightening in a way he hadn't expected. Time passed slowly. The sun rose higher, and John felt the heat pressing down on him. He tried to focus on something other than the pain, counting the rocks and the blades of grass around him. He reminded himself that he was strong, that he had survived tough situations before, and that he could survive this too. But as the minutes stretched into an hour, his hope began to fade. The ranch felt impossibly large, and he was just one man, vulnerable and alone. Then, without warning, he saw movement at the edge of the field. At first he thought it was a trick of the light, but the figure became clearer. A woman was walking toward him, confident and steady, as if she had been expecting this moment. She was not like anyone John had ever seen on the ranch. Her movements were precise, almost silent, and she carried herself with a calm that seemed impossible given the harsh surroundings. Her eyes scanned the land carefully, and there was a look of determination on her face. As she drew closer, John noticed the details. Her clothes were practical, worn from travel, but they didn't hide her strength. Her hands were steady, and her posture was that of someone used to facing danger. John felt a mixture of surprise and relief. He had not expected anyone to be here, especially not someone who looked capable of handling themselves in the wild. Without a word, the woman approached him. She knelt beside John and inspected his leg. Her touch was firm but careful, checking for broken bones or serious injuries. John tried to speak to thank her, but his words came out hoarse and uncertain. I don't know how to thank you," he said, his voice trembling slightly. The woman only nodded, her eyes focused on the task at hand. She produced a small bundle from her bag and began to wrap his leg with careful precision. The bandages were simple but effective, and John felt immediate relief. Once she had stabilized his leg, she helped him to his feet. Her strength was surprising, and John could barely manage on his own. Together, they made their way back towards safer ground. The journey was slow, but she seemed to know exactly where to go, avoiding loose rocks and uneven terrain. John tried to make conversation, asking her where she was from and what had brought her here. She replied simply, "I came this way and saw you needed help." There was no boast in her voice, only a quiet confidence that reassured him. As they walked, John observed her closely. There was a skill in the way she moved, a deep understanding of the land that only someone who had spent years in it could possess. He realized she must have faced challenges like this many times before. He felt a growing respect for her, mixed with gratitude. The fear and loneliness that had weighed on him only moments before began to fade. By the time they reached a safe area near the ranch house, the sun was high in the sky. John could see the familiar buildings in the distance, and a sense of hope returned. He realized that without her he might still be stranded, struggling against the pain and the heat. He wanted to express his gratitude properly, but words felt insufficient. He simply nodded, a silent acknowledgement of her courage and skill. The woman smiled slightly, as if she understood without needing words. There was a quiet bond forming between them, built on the shared experience of danger and survival. John realized that he had encountered someone extraordinary, someone who could face the wild with confidence and calm. He felt a mix of admiration and curiosity, wondering what stories she carried with her and what had shaped her into the person he had just met. As they reached the ranch, John leaned heavily on her support. His leg throbbed, but he was safe. He looked around at the familiar land, grateful to be back, but he also felt a sense of awe at the woman who had rescued him. He knew this day would stay with him forever, the memory of being helped by someone so capable, so brave, and so unexpected. For a moment they both stood in silence, taking in the quiet of the ranch and the warmth of the sun. The wind continued to whisper through the grass, but now it carried a sense of calm instead of fear. John realized that life on the ranch could be unpredictable and dangerous, but it could also bring moments of extraordinary human connection. That morning, John had learned something important. The land could be harsh, and challenges could appear without warning, but courage and kindness could come from unexpected places. The woman who had appeared seemingly out of nowhere had shown him that strength and bravery were not limited to the people he expected. Dude. And in that quiet moment, as the sun shone down on the ranch, John felt a deep gratitude that he would carry with him for the rest of his life. John could feel the heat of the sun pressing down on his back as he leaned heavily on the woman's shoulder. Every step reminded him of the sharp pain in his leg, and he knew that if he stumbled now, the consequences could be worse than before. But she moved with quiet confidence, her steps sure and steady even on the uneven ground. He was amazed at how strong she was, how she seemed completely at ease in a place that had almost caused him serious harm. They moved slowly but carefully through the rough terrain, stepping over rocks, dodging low-hanging branches, and avoiding patches of dry, brittle grass that might give way underfoot. John had always thought of himself as capable and strong, but now he realized just how much danger he had underestimated. The woman seemed to sense his thoughts, and she glanced at him with a small, knowing smile. It was not a mocking smile, but one of understanding, as if she had seen this many times before. "Can you walk a little on your own?" she asked gently. Her voice was calm, steady, and full of authority. It was not harsh, but it carried a strength that made him trust her instantly. I think so," John said, wincing as he put pressure on his leg. He took a tentative step, and the sharp pain made him stumble. She reached out and steadied him without a word, gripping his arm firmly but carefully. The warmth of her hand was reassuring, and for the first time in hours, John felt a spark of hope. "Slowly," she said. "There's a safer path just ahead. You'll make it." John nodded, swallowing hard. He had never depended on anyone like this before, and the realization made him feel both grateful and uneasy. He had spent his life being self-reliant, handling every challenge alone, but now he understood that some situations required help, and that was not a weakness. As they moved forward, John noticed the way she studied the land. Her eyes scanned every detail, the direction of the wind, the pattern of the rocks, the subtle signs that might indicate danger. She moved almost instinctively, adjusting her steps and guiding him to safer ground. It was clear she was not just strong, but also highly skilled in navigating the wild. John could not help but admire her. I'm John," he said after a few moments of silence, trying to start a conversation to distract himself from the pain. "Call me Kaya," she replied simply. The name was short, but carried a certain weight, as if it belonged to someone who had faced many challenges and survived. "It's nice to meet you, Kaya," John said, forcing a small smile. He noticed that her eyes briefly met his, and there was a spark of amusement there, though her expression remained calm. "I don't know how to thank you for helping me." Kaya shook her head. "You don't need to thank me. You were in danger, and I did what I could." Her words were simple, but there was an honesty and humility in them that made John respect her even more. They continued walking, and John found himself observing her more closely. Her movements were precise, controlled, and efficient. She carried only what she needed, but everything seemed purposeful. He realized she had clearly spent years learning how to survive in this kind of environment. Every action, every step, every glance had a reason behind it. As they approached a small stream, Kaya paused and knelt down, gesturing for John to do the same. "We need to clean the cut on your leg before it gets worse," she said. She produced a small cloth from her bag and a little water from the stream, carefully cleaning the wound. John winced at the sting, but her gentle hands kept him calm. "You've done this before," he said, trying to make conversation. "Many times," she replied simply. "Out here you learn quickly. You have to be prepared." John nodded, impressed. He had always thought he knew the land, but now he realized there was much more to it than he had imagined. The quiet knowledge and skill she displayed made him feel both awed and humbled. After cleaning the wound, she wrapped it carefully with her cloth, ensuring it was secure but not too tight. She then helped him stand again, testing his balance and adjusting his stance to make sure he could move safely. "You're stronger than you think," she said, giving him a brief, encouraging smile. John felt a strange mix of gratitude and admiration. He had faced many challenges in his life, but he had never encountered someone as capable and composed as Kaya. Her presence gave him a sense of safety he hadn't felt in hours, and he realized that he was beginning to trust her completely. As they moved on, they came across a fallen tree blocking their path. John groaned, thinking about how difficult it would be to navigate around it, but Kaya simply assessed the situation and pointed to a narrow space between the tree and the rocks. "We can go through here," she said. "Take it slow." With her guidance, John carefully stepped through the narrow gap, his heart pounding as he avoided sharp branches and loose rocks. Kaya followed closely behind, ready to support him if needed. The teamwork between them felt natural, as if they had been working together for years. For a moment, John allowed himself to relax, thinking that perhaps the worst was behind him, but the ranch was still vast and wild, and he knew the danger was never fully gone. He kept his focus on Kaya, trusting her instincts and following her lead. As they walked, she spoke briefly about the land, pointing out signs of wildlife and explaining how to read the environment. John listened intently, fascinated by her knowledge. He realized that surviving here required not only strength but also observation, patience, and understanding. Kaya seemed to possess all of these qualities in abundance. Hours passed, and the sun climbed higher in the sky. John's leg ached and he was exhausted, but Kaya's presence made the journey bearable. Her calm confidence and quiet guidance kept him moving forward. He began to feel a sense of connection with her, a bond formed through shared struggle and mutual respect. Finally, they reached a small ridge that overlooked a safer part of the ranch. John could see his home in the distance, and relief washed over him. He had survived thanks to her. He wanted to express his gratitude, but words seemed inadequate. Instead, he simply nodded, and Kaya nodded back, understanding his unspoken thanks. As they prepared to descend toward the ranch, a sudden noise startled John. A herd of cattle, spooked by a hawk or some unseen movement, rushed past them. John froze, unsure of what to do, but Kaya acted immediately. She positioned herself between him and the cattle, using her presence to guide them away from danger. Her quick thinking and fearlessness amazed him. "Stay close," she said firmly. "We'll make it." John followed her lead, marveling at how she handled the situation with such calm and skill. Within moments, the cattle had passed, and the danger was gone. John exhaled, feeling a rush of gratitude and admiration for her bravery. As they finally reached a safe spot near the ranch house, John felt a mixture of relief, exhaustion, and awe. Kaya had saved him not just once but repeatedly, navigating the dangers of the land and guiding him back to safety. He realized that he had encountered someone truly extraordinary, someone who combined strength, skill, and courage in a way he had never seen before. For a long moment they stood in silence, taking in the quiet of the ranch and the warmth of the sun. John felt a deep sense of gratitude and respect, knowing that he owed his safety to her. Kaya, for her part, seemed unfazed, calm, and composed, as if what she had done was simply part of life. John finally spoke, his voice filled with both relief and admiration. I don't know how to thank you. You saved me today." Kaya smiled faintly, a small, confident curve of her lips. "You were in danger. I did what I could," she said simply, her tone steady and unwavering. John nodded, feeling the weight of her words. He realized that some people were born to face challenges like this, and that bravery and skill were not limited by gender, culture, or background. He felt a spark of admiration and curiosity about her, wondering about the life that had shaped her into someone so capable and fearless. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows over the ranch, John knew that this day would stay with him forever. He had been tested, challenged, and ultimately saved, and he had met someone extraordinary in the process. The experience had changed him, showing him that strength, courage, and kindness could come from unexpected places, and that trust, once given, could create powerful bonds between people. The ranch house finally came into view, its wooden walls glowing softly in the late afternoon sun. John's legs ached with every step, but he felt a deep sense of relief. He had survived the dangerous fall, the wild terrain, and the moments when he thought he might not make it. But more than that, he felt a growing sense of trust and admiration for Kaya, the woman who had guided him back to safety. She had been calm when he panicked, strong when he was weak, and remarkably skilled in ways he had never imagined. Kaya helped him reach the porch of the ranch house. John leaned heavily on her, grateful for her steady support. "I can't believe you managed all that by yourself," he said, trying to catch his breath. "If you hadn't come along, I don't even want to think about it." Kaya shrugged lightly, her expression calm and confident. "The land is dangerous. People get hurt all the time. I just happened to be here." There was no arrogance in her voice, just a quiet honesty. She studied him carefully, making sure he could move safely. "You need to rest before you do anything else." John nodded, realizing she was right. Even as a rancher who had faced storms, wild animals, and accidents, he had underestimated how serious this fall had been. The pain in his leg was sharp, but manageable now thanks to her care. He slowly lowered himself onto a wooden bench on the porch, sighing with relief as his muscles loosened. Kaya crouched beside him, taking off her pack and rummaging through it. She pulled out a small water bottle and handed it to him. "Drink," she said. "You need to stay hydrated." John accepted it gratefully, the cool water soothing his dry throat. "Thank you, Kaya," he said, feeling the words rise from somewhere deep inside. He had spent hours thinking about how he could repay her, but nothing seemed sufficient. I don't know how to thank you properly." Kaya gave a faint smile. "You don't have to thank me. You're safe. That's enough." She glanced around the porch, her eyes sharp and attentive. "But you need to keep your leg elevated. It will help with the swelling." John nodded, adjusting himself carefully as Kaya placed a small bundle under his leg. He watched her as she worked, noticing every movement, the precision, the care, the quiet confidence. She wasn't just strong, she was thoughtful and meticulous, attentive to details he had never considered. The realization made him feel both humbled and grateful. For a while they sat in silence. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of grass and earth. John's breathing gradually slowed, and he began to feel more at ease. Kaya's calm presence had a way of settling his mind, washing away the panic and fear that had dominated the earlier hours. Finally, John spoke. "You didn't have to do all this for me," he said softly. "You didn't even know me. You could have just kept going." Kaya tilted her head slightly, studying him with a quiet intensity. "Sometimes people need help," she said simply. "And sometimes it's not about knowing someone. It's about doing what's right." Her eyes held a spark of determination, a fire that seemed to come from deep inside her. John felt a shiver run down his spine, not from fear, but from admiration. He wanted to say more, to express how much her actions meant to him, but the words caught in his throat. Instead, he simply nodded, letting his gaze meet hers. There was a quiet understanding between them now, a shared recognition of what had just happened and the bond it had created. Kaya sat back on her heels and glanced at the ranch house. "You'll need help getting inside," she said. "The inside is safer, and you can rest more comfortably there." She offered her hand to him again, and he took it, letting her guide him slowly toward the door. Once inside, John carefully lowered himself onto a sturdy chair near the hearth. Kaya helped him remove his boots and gently check the bandage on his leg again. "It's holding," she said. "You'll be sore, but it's stable. Keep it elevated and rest as much as possible." John leaned back, feeling the warmth of the room and the comfort of finally being somewhere safe. He had faced countless dangers on the ranch before, but this was different. This time, he had depended on someone else entirely, and that thought filled him with a strange mix of gratitude and humility. "Do you want anything to eat?" Kaya asked. "There's some bread and dried meat inside. It won't be fancy, but it will help you regain strength." John shook his head, smiling faintly. "No, thank you. I just want to rest for a little while." He realized how exhausted he was, physically and emotionally. The ordeal had left him drained, but being with Kaya also left him strangely alert, aware of every small movement, every glance. Kaya nodded and moved to a corner of the room, sitting cross-legged and quietly observing him. There was a confidence in the way she carried herself, a sense of calm control that made him feel safe even when he was most vulnerable. He couldn't help but notice the way her eyes scanned the room, alert for any danger, yet gentle and kind at the same time. As the afternoon stretched on, John began to feel the weight of his exhaustion. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting himself relax, trusting that Kaya would be there if anything went wrong. When he opened them again, he noticed her watching him with a faint, amused smile. "You're tired," she said, her voice soft but firm. "You should rest. I'll stay nearby." "You're safe here," John nodded, feeling a warmth in his chest at her words. It wasn't just the reassurance of safety. It was the care, the attentiveness, the fact that she had gone out of her way to help him. He had never expected to feel this way about a stranger, yet here he was, grateful and aware of a connection that was growing stronger by the minute. A long silence followed, broken only by the soft crackle of the hearth. John found himself studying her, noticing small details he hadn't before, the way her hands moved with quiet confidence, the steady gaze of her eyes, the calmness in her posture. She was unlike anyone he had ever met, someone who combined strength, skill, and compassion in a way that seemed almost effortless. Finally, something inside him shifted. He realized that he wanted to express more than just gratitude. He wanted to acknowledge her bravery, her strength, and the way she had made him feel safe when the world had seemed dangerous. He swallowed hard, unsure how to begin, but before he could speak, Kaya leaned forward slightly, her eyes locking with his. "Rest now," she said gently. "You've been through a lot. There's no need to talk." John nodded, but a small smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. He felt an unusual warmth at her presence, a mix of respect, curiosity, and something more he couldn't quite name. The tension that had hung over the day slowly began to fade, replaced by a quiet, comfortable closeness. As the evening approached, the light in the room softened, casting gentle shadows across their faces. John noticed the faint curve of Kaya's lips as she offered a reassuring smile. For a moment he felt a strange urge to reach out, to express the depth of his gratitude and admiration in a way that words alone could not convey. And then, almost instinctively, Kaya moved closer. She placed her hand lightly on his arm, steadying him as he adjusted in the chair. Their eyes met, and in that instant, John understood something he hadn't expected. This was more than just survival, more than just rescue. There was a connection here, a spark that had grown quietly over the course of the day, now impossible to ignore. Before he could think too much, Kaya leaned forward and pressed her lips to his in a brief, gentle kiss. It was not hurried or forced, just a simple human gesture of care and reassurance. John's eyes widened in surprise, and he felt a rush of emotions, gratitude, awe, and a deep unspoken connection. He blinked, still trying to process what had just happened, when Kaya pulled back slightly and smirked, a playful glint in her eyes. "I saved you," she said softly, almost teasingly, yet full of the quiet confidence that had defined her all day. John could only shake his head, a mixture of amazement and admiration on his face. You really did," he whispered. For the first time since the fall, John felt completely safe, not just because his injuries were tended to, but because of the bond that had formed between them. It was a moment of trust, of connection, and of recognition that some relationships could begin in the most unexpected ways, born out of courage, kindness, and shared experience. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow through the room, John leaned back in his chair, his leg elevated and his heart lighter than it had been in hours. Kaya remained near, calm and composed, yet the faint smile on her face suggested she too felt the quiet strength of the bond they had forged. In that moment, the dangers of the ranch, the fall, and the wild terrain all seemed far away. What remained was a simple truth. They had survived. They had trusted each other, and they had found something unexpected in the process, a human connection that neither of them would forget. The next morning, the sun rose over the ranch with a soft golden light, spilling warmth across the fields and illuminating the wooden structures that had been John's home for years. John woke slowly, still feeling the soreness in his leg, but also a strange sense of peace. The events of the previous day had left him exhausted, but they had also opened his eyes to something unexpected, a bond he had formed with Kaya, the woman who had rescued him. He glanced around the room and saw her sitting quietly on the floor, her back against the wall, watching him with calm, observant eyes. For a moment he simply smiled, grateful for her presence. She had stayed through the night not because she had to, but because she had chosen to, and that thought filled him with appreciation. "Good morning," he said softly, his voice still rough from fatigue. "Morning, Kaya," replied, her tone calm and measured. She didn't rush him, and her quiet presence felt reassuring. "How's your leg?" "Better," he admitted. "Still sore, but I think I can move around a bit today." He flexed it gently, testing the strength, and felt a twinge of pain, but nothing unbearable. Kaya nodded, as if she had expected that. "You'll need to be careful," she said. "The terrain is rough, and we still have to make it across the open field to the safer part of the ranch. Take it slow." John agreed, knowing she was right. They had survived the immediate danger, but the ranch was still vast and unpredictable. Even simple obstacles could become dangerous if he wasn't careful. He relied on Kaya for guidance, and her steady presence gave him confidence he didn't know he had. Together, they prepared for the journey back. Kaya gathered supplies from her pack, water, a small bit of food, and a few basic tools, and secured them carefully. She moved efficiently, every action deliberate and precise. John watched her, fascinated by the way she handled even the smallest tasks with calm authority. He had never seen someone so capable and self-reliant, and he felt both admiration and gratitude. Once they were ready, Kaya helped him to his feet. He leaned on her, letting her support his weight as they stepped outside into the morning light. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of grass, earth, and distant trees. John felt a renewed sense of determination. He knew that, with Kaya by his side, he could make it safely across the fields and back to the ranch house where he truly belonged. The journey was slow, each step deliberate and careful. John had to navigate uneven ground, hidden rocks, and small gullies, all while keeping his balance. Kaya moved beside him, her hand lightly resting on his back for support whenever necessary. Her presence was calming, and he realized he was beginning to trust her completely, not just for his safety, but for guidance and companionship. As they walked, Kaya pointed out subtle signs in the land that John had never noticed before. "See the tracks there?" she said, pointing to faint impressions in the dirt. "Those belonged to a coyote. It passed through last night. Not dangerous now, but it shows how alert you need to be." John nodded, impressed. He had spent his life on this land, but he had never truly observed it with this level of care. Kaya's knowledge was extensive, and he realized how much he had underestimated the skills needed to survive in the open plains. They continued in silence for a while, the only sounds being the rustle of the grass, the distant call of birds, and the crunch of their footsteps on the earth. John found comfort in the quiet, feeling a sense of companionship he had rarely experienced before. Kaya's calm presence allowed him to focus, to think clearly, and to navigate the terrain safely. After some time, they reached a narrow stream cutting across the field. John's leg twinged as he stepped over a slippery rock, and he almost lost his balance. Kaya's hand shot out, instinctively gripping his arm firmly and steadying him. "Careful," she said, her voice calm but firm. "One step at a time." He nodded, taking her advice seriously. Together, they crossed the stream, moving slowly but steadily. John felt a mixture of relief and admiration for her. She seemed to anticipate danger before it happened, guiding him with a quiet confidence that made him feel safe despite the challenges around them. As they continued, the terrain became more challenging. The ground sloped upward, rocks jutted out unexpectedly, and patches of dry grass threatened to give way. John's lead protested with every step, but Kaya was there, offering support and encouragement. "You're doing well," she said, smiling faintly. "Just a little farther. Keep your focus." John appreciated her words more than he could express. Her encouragement was not patronizing. It was honest and motivating, giving him the strength to keep moving forward. He realized that her presence was more than just physical support. It was emotional support as well, a steadying force that helped him push past his fatigue and pain. As the afternoon wore on, they reached a small hill that offered a view of the ranch below. John paused to catch his breath, leaning on Kaya for support. The sight of the familiar fields, the wooden fences, and the distant house filled him with relief and a sense of accomplishment. They had made it this far, and the worst of the danger seemed behind them. "Almost there," Kaya said softly, noticing his gaze. "Just a little farther, and you'll be safe." John nodded, feeling a surge of determination. He had faced challenges before, but this journey had taught him a new respect for the unpredictability of the land and the value of trust. He looked at Kaya, realizing that he had never met someone like her, someone capable, brave, and kind all at once. As they descended the hill toward the ranch, a sudden rustling in the grass caught John's attention. A small group of wild deer burst into view, startled by their presence. John froze instinctively, worried that the movement might trigger something dangerous, but Kaya remained calm. She guided him carefully around the deer, keeping a steady hand on his arm. "See?" she said quietly. "Nothing dangerous, just nature doing what it does." John exhaled slowly, relieved. He realized how easily fear could take over and how important it was to have someone experienced guiding him. Kaya's calm confidence had kept him safe through every challenge, and he felt an increasing respect for her abilities. The rest of the journey passed without incident, though the terrain remained uneven and demanding. John leaned on Kaya when he needed support, and she never hesitated to help. They moved as a team, their coordination growing naturally with every step. There was an unspoken understanding between them, a quiet bond formed through shared struggle and reliance on each other. By the time they reached the edge of the ranch near the house, the sun was beginning to set, casting a warm golden light across the fields. John paused for a moment, taking in the view. He felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for surviving the fall and the rough terrain, but for having someone like Kaya by his side. "You made it," she said, smiling faintly. "Safe and sound." John nodded, his heart swelling with appreciation. "I couldn't have done it without you," he admitted. "Not just because of my leg, but because of everything. You guided me. You helped me stay calm. I don't even know how to thank you." Kaya shrugged, her expression modest but confident. "You don't need to thank me," she said. "You made it through. That's what matters." John smiled, feeling a strange warmth in his chest. He realized that the journey had changed him. He had relied on someone else, and in doing so had discovered the value of trust, teamwork, and human connection. He had met someone extraordinary, someone who had shown him courage, skill, and care in ways he had never imagined. As they reached the porch of the ranch house, John's legs finally allowed him to rest. He sank into a chair, exhausted but deeply content. Kaya sat nearby, calm and composed, her eyes still watchful but gentle. The bond between them had grown stronger with every challenge they had faced together, and both knew that this was only the beginning of a unique and meaningful connection. For a long while they sat in silence, watching the sun sink behind the distant hills. The air was filled with the quiet sounds of the ranch, the rustling grass, the occasional call of a bird, and the gentle breeze. John felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. The land was still wild and unpredictable, but he no longer felt alone. He had someone to trust, someone who had proven herself in the most extraordinary way. As darkness fell, John leaned back in his chair, his leg elevated and his heart full. He realized that the journey had taught him more than survival. It had taught him the value of human connection, the importance of trust, and the extraordinary strength that could be found in unexpected people. Kaya had saved him not just from the dangers of the land, but from the isolation he had grown accustomed to. And as they sat together in the fading light, John knew that their story was far from over. There were still challenges to face, but for the first time he felt ready to face them, not alone, but with someone he could rely on, someone extraordinary who had become more than just a rescuer. The morning sun spilled over the ranch once again, painting the fields in shades of gold and green. John woke slowly, feeling stronger than he had in days. His leg still throbbed, a reminder of the fall, but the pain had lessened enough that he could move around with some ease. He stretched carefully, savoring the quiet sounds of the ranch, the distant lowing of cattle, the gentle rustle of the wind through the tall grass, and the soft clatter of birdsong from nearby trees. Kaya was already awake, sitting near the edge of the porch with her pack beside her. She was watching the horizon, her posture relaxed but attentive, as if she were ready for anything the land might throw their way. John observed her quietly for a moment, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. The past days had been challenging, but they had also been transformative. He had faced danger, fear, and exhaustion, and through it all, Kaya had been his guide, his protector, and, in ways he didn't yet fully understand, a companion he could trust. "Good morning," John said softly, his voice a mixture of weariness and warmth. "Morning," Kaya replied, glancing at him with a faint smile. "How's your leg today?" "Better," he said, flexing it carefully. "I think I can manage a short walk around the ranch." He paused, looking at her. "Thanks to you?" Kaya's smile widened slightly. "You're welcome. Just don't push yourself too hard. The land has a way of testing people, and you've already passed one difficult test." John chuckled quietly, feeling lighter than he had in days. "I suppose I have," he said. He thought back to the fall, the wild terrain, and the moments when he had feared he might not survive. The memory still sent a shiver down his spine, but it was now mixed with relief and admiration. For the land, for the challenges, and most of all, for Kaya. After a simple breakfast of bread and fresh water, they began to move around the ranch together. John was careful with each step, relying on Kaya's steady presence and occasional support when he needed it. They inspected fences, checked on the cattle, and moved through the fields at a slow, steady pace. Each action was deliberate, ensuring that John's leg would not be strained while still making progress. As they worked, John found himself observing Kaya more closely. She moved with purpose and grace, yet there was a softness in her gestures that contrasted beautifully with her strength. She spoke quietly about the land, pointing out areas that might need repair or places where the soil was especially fertile. John listened intently, realizing that her knowledge of the land was deep and instinctive, a skill that went far beyond what he had learned in years of ranching. "You really know this land," he said, glancing at her with admiration. "I've lived here my whole life, and I've never noticed half the things you point out." Kaya shrugged lightly. "I pay attention," she said simply. "You can't survive out here if you don't." Her tone was calm, almost matter-of-fact, but John sensed the pride in her voice. She had faced challenges, navigated dangers, and yet remained composed through it all. He found himself respecting her more with every passing moment. As the day wore on, they came across a broken fence at the far edge of the property. John winced at the thought of fixing it with his injured leg, but Kaya immediately took charge. She guided him to a safer position and began repairing the fence with skilled hands. John helped where he could, handing her tools and supporting posts, but she led every move, her experience and confidence shining through. "You're surprisingly patient," John said after a while, trying to make conversation. "I might have been frustrated after the fall, but you keep calm no matter what." Kaya smiled faintly, her eyes focused on the task at hand. "Patience is necessary out here," she said. "Rushing leads to mistakes, and mistakes can be dangerous." John nodded, realizing how true her words were. The land was unforgiving, but with someone like Kaya by his side, he felt capable of handling it. Their teamwork flowed naturally, each action complementing the other, and John began to feel a deep sense of companionship. It was more than survival. It was trust, respect, and an unspoken understanding that had formed in the past days. By late afternoon, the fence was repaired, the cattle accounted for, and the ranch fields looked safer than they had in days. John leaned back on the porch, exhausted but satisfied. Kaya joined him, sitting beside him with a quiet, confident ease. They watched the horizon together, the setting sun casting warm light over the land. "You know," John began, breaking the comfortable silence, "I never imagined the ranch could feel this alive. Not the way it does with you here. You've shown me a side of it I've never seen before." Kaya glanced at him, her eyes reflecting the fading sunlight. "The land has many sides," she said softly. "You just need to pay attention." John smiled, feeling a warmth in his chest he couldn't quite describe. He realized that he had not only survived a dangerous fall, but had also discovered something rare, someone whose presence could bring calm, confidence, and even joy into the harshest of circumstances. As evening fell, the two of them prepared a simple meal together. Kaya moved with practiced efficiency, and John helped where he could, still cautious of his leg. They talked quietly about their experiences, the land, and small stories from their lives. John found himself opening up in a way he rarely had, sharing memories and thoughts he usually kept to himself. Kaya listened with attention and interest, her responses thoughtful and engaging. By the time the stars began to twinkle in the sky, John felt a deep sense of peace. The ranch was quiet, the air cool and soft, and Kaya remained by his side, a constant presence of strength and calm. He realized that he had not only survived, but had grown, learning about trust, resilience, and the importance of connection. Finally, as the night deepened, John spoke quietly. "Kaya, I don't know how to explain this, but I feel safe with you. Not just because you saved me, but because of everything. Your calm, your strength, your presence. It means more than I can say." Kaya looked at him, her expression softening. She reached out and placed a hand lightly on his shoulder, a gesture of reassurance and warmth. "I'm glad," she said simply. "You don't have to say more. Actions are enough." John felt a wave of gratitude and something deeper, a recognition that their bond had grown beyond mere survival. There was trust, respect, and an unspoken connection that had formed through shared challenges and quiet moments. He realized that the past days had not only saved his life physically, but had opened a door to something meaningful, something that could last beyond the dangers they had faced. They sat together for a long while, watching the stars and listening to the quiet of the ranch. The air was filled with the gentle sounds of the night, crickets, distant calls of animals, and the soft rustle of leaves. John felt at peace, knowing that he was no longer alone in the vast, unpredictable land. He had someone to rely on, someone who had proven her strength, wisdom, and care time and again. As they finally prepared for sleep, John realized that he had learned an important lesson. Life on the ranch would always be full of challenges, and the land would remain wild and unpredictable. But with trust, courage, and the right companion, even the harshest obstacles could be faced. He had found that companion in Kaya, and he knew that their bond was something rare and valuable. Before drifting off to sleep, John glanced at her one last time. She was quietly organizing a few supplies, her movements calm and deliberate. He felt a deep sense of respect and admiration. Kaya had not only saved him from danger, but had also shown him the value of trust, connection, and courage. In the quiet of the ranch, under the starlit sky, John felt a sense of hope for the future, hope that went beyond survival and into something meaningful, shared, and enduring. And as sleep finally claimed him, John knew that the days ahead would be different. The ranch would remain challenging, life would continue to test him, but now he would face it not alone, but with someone extraordinary by his side, a person whose presence had transformed danger into safety, fear into trust, and a simple day on the ranch into the beginning of something unforgettable.